Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Faith Focus Weekly Discipleship Podcast. My name is Kevin Rogness, and I'm the Discipleship Director here at Faith Covenant Church. And as always, I want to encourage you to make sure you never miss an episode. So please subscribe, whether you're on YouTube or any of the major podcasting platforms. And you can also access this through the Faith Connect app that we offer through the Apple App Store or the Google App Store, whichever one that you use. So today, I'm joined by Pastor Char for a few conversations. Lately, she and I have been she and I and others on staff have kind of talked about different seasons of life, and we kind of thought that would make for an interesting podcast series. So today we're starting the first of 3 episodes in which we'll kind of talk about different seasons of life, and there'll be overlap, and it's not like these are a prescriptive definition of like what exactly is happening in these seasons. They're just kind of generalities that can help us understand kind of how to disciple people where they are.
Yes.
So what are the first 2 seasons that we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, today we're talking about young ones. So generally kids who are still at home, so birth to age 18 roughly. So that's separated into childhood and the teen years. So birth to 12, and I know there's a big gap right there, and then 13 to 18.
Yep.
So, and it's not like at 12, all of a sudden that cuts off and you move into all the teen stuff. But
yes,
to your point earlier, things flow into each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you're a parent, so you mean you've had kids in this age zone.
Yes.
What is maybe the biggest thing that you learned about those seasons of like 0 to 18?
Yeah. Well, what we learned, basically, we have 2 kids, a son who's 25 next week and a daughter who's 22. They are very different from each other. Very different.
They are.
So the way that our son progressed through things was different than the way our daughter progressed through things. The way that they responded to us and all of that, all of their development was different.
Yeah.
I mean, there are general things that follow through,
Right.
but our 2 kids were very different. So every child is different. Every person's different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that just goes to what I said earlier. Like, this is not necessarily a descriptive order of things.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a generality.
Yep.
So what do you see as some of the defining pieces of these 2 seasons?
Yeah, so childhood is largely about play, learning how to play, attachment to a caregiver, whether it's a parent typically, differentiation between self and other, like I am not my mother, I am not my father, I am a unique person, separate, and what does that mean, and what does that look like, and how am I different than an adult,
right?
Who cares about me? How am I different from an adult? How am I unique and separate from my siblings or my friends? So that's a big piece for childhood. Obedience is a big piece, and that we'll talk about that more with the spiritual development, because that's important.
Yeah.
You know, a child learns to obey without question, an authority figure that they can trust, who loves them, and then that leads to their obedience of God in later years. So those are big things for children. Teens continue a lot of that differentiation of self. Teens are forming their identity. They're starting that process of who am I really, and thinking about that more deeply. Friendships, relationships, interpersonal things are really important for teens. Values. They say a child's worldview is largely established by age 14.
Okay.
So, I mean, obviously it's not a done deal at 14,
Right.
but largely your worldview is established by 14, and actually your values are established by age 3, they say, which is kind of shocking to think about. Yeah. So those
I
are
can't think of
important
anything
pieces.
I was thinking about when I was 3 other than like Legos in my sandbox.
But that's a cool thing, because the value, when I first heard that, I was like, what? Because that seemed like a lot of pressure when you have little kids. But it's not like they understand values, but they learned what you or what their caregiver assigns value to, that's important. So, when we sit down to eat, we pause and we pray before. That's a value. We go to church on Sundays. That's a value. Things that their parents do or say.
I'm not supposed to hit my sibling. That's a value.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So kids are learning value even if they can't articulate them yet.
Wow. I didn't know that was kind of already in place by 13, but if I think about it, like
3.
when I look at like 3.
Yeah.
When I look at my nieces and nephews, you know, I do see that they kind of start to understand some of those things.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Kids are sponges. They learn a whole lot more than I think we realize.
Right.
So then what is kind of the work that is done in these seasons?
Yeah. So the work for for a child, the value piece we just talked about, I would say that's the main value for a little child, is just that value, the main value, the value formation.
Yeah.
And just learning safety and who I am, and being able to thrive in an environment that's a safe environment.
Yeah.
The freedom to start exploring in some areas of interest. For teens, the main work is worldview and identity. So what is my worldview? And they start trying on different things. Maybe, well, my parents did it this way. I wonder if there's another way to do it. I wonder what happened if I tried this, and that kind of thing. So they're trying on. They're starting to try on different identities and worldview.
I can definitely relate to that, because my family is very much into sports, like baseball. My older brothers were like baseball, and I was like, I think I want to do theater. And so it was just it was just really different than, and my parents were supportive of that, but it was just like, this is a very different course than the people in my family.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a,
yeah.
I mean, it wasn't surprising, because I'd done other theater things earlier, but yeah, it was just kind of like, okay, I am very different than them.
Yeah, and that can be a hard thing to parent through.
Yeah.
Because some of that in the teenage years, that can look like rebellion, and sometimes it is, and sometimes there are unhealthy things that are tried on, but the intent typically isn't to be defiant. It's to, I'm going to try something, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this. Is this who I am? Is this who I want to be? So there needs to be that balance of freedom to do that without a parent freaking out, but also guidance and boundaries, for sure, which kids, even though they might say they don't want your rules and your boundaries, they do. They want them, and they need them, and they're critical to their formation. Well, and I can look back on a lot of the rules that my parents had for me, and at the time I maybe didn't like it or understand it, but now I'm like, yep, now I get it. That was a very smart thing that they did with that. Well, and I had another thought, but and so the other thing I was thinking of is, when kids are trying on these different things, whether it's activities or friends or whatever, sometimes it's not that they're an unhealthy thing, it's just maybe it's something that the parent isn't familiar with, or it's just a difference in common. It's just not something they have in common. And so, like, my dad and I don't necessarily have a lot in common. And so when I did in theater, it was just kind of like, okay, what do we talk about now? And so that's kind of thing, part of the difficulty too, is just not that the kid's doing something wrong or bad. It's just something that there's no common ground on. Right. I don't know how to parent you through that. I don't know how to encourage you in that. I don't really understand that world. For sure. Traveling sports was that way. Yes. With us and our daughter, we just didn't. That wasn't a thing for either Kirk or I growing up. So to be on a traveling team, that was like, oh wow, that's a big commitment. I do remember one time our daughter wanted to play hockey really badly, and I cannot imagine Erica as a hockey player. She's very coordinated. And there was one Halloween she went as a nerd on roller skates, she and a friend. So they dressed up like nerds, and then they put their rollerblades on. That's such a random combination. I know. That was them. So they had rollerblades, not roller skates. So they were out just skating around on Halloween, and I was with them. And this man came up to me on the street and said, "Is that your kid?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Can she do that on ice?" And I was like, I don't know, maybe. And he was a hockey coach, and he was recruiting. He was looking for girls to play hockey. So she heard that, and of course she was all over, like, I want to play hockey. And that was the one time I remember saying no to her. And I said, I don't have a problem with hockey. I actually like watching hockey. I grew up in Duluth. I grew up watching hockey and enjoying it, but I don't want a hockey lifestyle. So we had that conversation. She found volleyball, and that was a much better lifestyle. Yes. But, well, and hockey is, like, I know people who have played hockey, and it's hard on your body in a way that a lot of sports aren't. I mean, any sport can be, but hockey's expensive. And it's weekends, and it's early mornings, and it's late nights, and as a pastor, that just wasn't going to work very well on Sundays anyway. Totally understandable. Yeah. So what would you say are some of, like, the unique joys of each season, some of the challenge? Let's start with joys, I guess. What are some of the joys of each season? Oh, a joy for a child is they get to play. Their world is about play. They get to play and learn that way. They get to receive the attention of others who are encouraging them and supporting them and loving on them. So just you don't have you don't have a care in the world as a child. You're not really responsible for a whole lot.
Yeah.
That changes as you get older. You get responsible for more things. But
Yes,
when you're a little kid, I have a 5-year-old nephew. He just gets to play. He's got some things he's asked to do now that he's in kindergarten. But largely his life up until now has been about playing and listening to mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and other adults in his life. For teens, the joys are just that growing and that broadening of understanding of self and others, and enjoying peer relationships are really important for teens. So that can be a source of stress, but it also can be a source of joy. Finding something you're good at, finding a sport or an activity or theater, something that you do that you're like, hey, I'm pretty good at this.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
You know, growing into a man's body or a woman's body, that can be stressful for some, but it can also be kind of fun that, I'm becoming an adult and I'm
tall now. I can.
Yeah.
I'm as tall as my parents.
My voice is changing, and that's I've got facial hair or whatever.
Stronger.
Yeah. So academic success, so seeing some of those things and having your own personal accolades can be a source of great joy for teens.
And then challenges, of course, are a part, and we've kind of touched on a couple of challenges, but what are some of the challenges unique to each season?
Well, for kids, attachment, friendship, not all kids have a healthy attachment with a caregiver, unfortunately. So that can be a big source of challenge for kids who don't have a healthy environment.
And what do you mean by attachment?
A good question. Attachment is the way you give and receive love from a caregiver very early on.
Okay.
So your attachment style is largely defined by like age 1 or 2. Okay. So do you have an adult in your life that you feel safe with, that you know loves you, that's predictable? Mm-hmm. So, and not every kid has that.
Right.
You know, some mental health, whatever, lots of different reasons. That home is not a safe environment, and adults are not predictable or reliable in the life of a child. So, and that has lasting consequences.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a big thing for kids. That's out of their control largely. Confidence can be a challenge. Friendships can be a challenge for kids. Kids can be mean to each other, even in the elementary years. Mm-hmm. So some of that are those challenges that start out for kids. Teens, oh boy, hormonal shifts, comparisons with others, friendship, dating, relationships, trying things that you want to be good at and then realizing that you're not very good at that. That can be really hard for a teen. Conflict at home as they're exploring different areas that may or may not align with the values of their family. That can be really challenging for a teen too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And part of what I'm curious about is with the challenges that today's children and teenagers are facing with like social media and stuff, I can't help but wonder, is that more challenging than the environment I grew up in, or is it just a different challenge? You know what I mean? So like it may be more difficult both for the kids and the parents to navigate world with social media, or is it just a different challenge than like what me and my parents had when I was what do you think? I mean, I don't have kids, so it's hard for me to say what it is today.
Well, that's a good question. That's a really good question. And you know, the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun, and no temptation has come, or no temptation has fallen on you except that which is common to man. Like in some ways, these things just have happened forever and will happen forever.
It's just new clothes.
Yeah.
Same problems, new clothing.
Yeah. So some of it is that way, but some of it is vastly different, because a kid might have trouble with peer pressure or with comparison or with friendships. And 50 years ago, or when I was a kid, 45 years ago, 50 years ago, that was limited to times I was face to face with somebody, or maybe on a phone call when I got older. But now it's 24/7. You pick up your phone and you start comparing, and you can start getting bullied, and you can start having somebody unfriend you, and you can start, their life is perfect. You can start all of that.
The potential for 24/7 conflict, basically.
Right, 24/7 comparison, 24/7 beating yourself up because you're not as good, as pretty, as photogenic, as you know, as many friends, as many boyfriends or girlfriends. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to not be raising children in this.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that the whole internet connectivity is, we were just at the cusp of that with our kids when they were in 7th or 8th grade, I think. their schools started giving them iPads, and that was brand new. That was like the first time that had ever happened. So now my kids are the first generation, really, the first year that kids are sent home from school with a device of their own that connects to the internet, and they have homework to do on it. So our conversations about, do you limit that? Do you say you have to be done by 8:00? Do you have to, do we take it away at a certain time? How do we limit it? We weren't even sure how to do those limits because it was all new. So anyway, that's a whole nother deal. We didn't have time for that one.
Well, and just I hope that parents probably know by this point, but most devices today do have a level of parental controls where you can kind of set parameters and timelines and restrict certain apps or sites, or So I just hope that parents know that and are cognizant of that. And I'm noticing a lot of my peers that did grow up with this emerging technology are being very careful about how much screen time they give their kids, because I think we saw amongst ourselves how consuming this is, and they're already kind of starting to react against that, which I think is interesting and healthy.
So. And that'll change as the generations go on. For us, I'm a digital immigrant, which means that I wasn't raised with any of this stuff. I had been married 8 years and had 2 kids before I got my first cell phone. It was a brick. And kids now, they're digital natives. They've grown up with it. But moving forward, everyone will be a digital native. When my kids have children, they'll will all be digital natives. So that'll be maybe a little interesting. That was thunder.
Oh, fun.
It's gonna.
So I don't know if that comes to the mic, but yes, that is thunder. Don't be scared. The building's not collapsing on us. We're fine.
No, we're good.
Yeah. Just thinking of that, I remember when my nephew was not even a year old, he already knew how to swipe on an iPad.
Yeah.
I was like, what? That just boggled my mind, because I didn't learn how to use a computer mouse until I was in 2nd grade.
Right.
And here my nephew is at not even a year old, and he already knows how to swipe through pictures. That freaks me out a little bit.
I remember being at the mall when Kyle was 14. I just remember that. I don't know why. And we were walking, and he saw a mom pushing a stroller, and the kid in the stroller had an iPad and was playing on the iPad. And my 14-year-old said, "When I was a kid," I was like,
"You still are a kid."
It has already happened, though. He was already old enough to look back and go, "Wow, I didn't have technology at that age."
Oh, yeah.
Because he didn't. My kids didn't get cell phones till 7th grade when they started doing sports after school. But they had leap pads.
I never even had that. I didn't get my first cell phone until I was a sophomore in college, which was way behind my peers. But anyway. And then maybe this is kind of similar to what we already said, but what are some of the potential pitfalls of each season?
Yeah.
Or is that really different than the challenges? Or?
Well, a pitfall is more, I think of that as more like getting stuck, you don't progress past a certain area. Like a kid, hopefully you start getting beyond, I'm the center of everybody's universe, not only mine.
Yes.
But hopefully by age 12 for sure, you're beyond that, and you realize that the whole world doesn't revolve around me. There are other people here that have needs and wants and desires too. So, and I know that, your brain's not done until you're 25, 26, that frontal lobe. And that is a big part of that is a selfishness, but it's also part of the human condition. We're just selfish, and that's sin. But a big part of that for kids is being stuck in. What I say is what everybody does. Everyone caters to me.
Yep.
I would say for a teen, rebellion would be a pitfall. If you get stuck and I'm going to try something out that is opposed to my family's values, I'm just going to stay there.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to, that can be a pitfall instead of trusting your adult as a redirection. And mental health issues can be really tough in the teen years.
Yeah.
When hormones kick in, and that you're very aware that there are other people around, and that comparison piece and that mental health can be a real tough thing if it's not addressed for teens.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so then what are some of the specific needs of these 2 seasons?
Yeah, well, the needs are loving caregivers.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Loving parents, teachers, grandparents, uncles, aunts, parents of friends, adult caregivers who are adults in your life who are healthy and who will love you and who will love you with some healthy limits and who will speak truth into you and redirect. That's really, really, really important for kids.
And so when you say like caregivers, you included a lot of different people.
Yeah.
So that may not mean that, like for me, I have 9 nieces and nephews. I'm a caregiver in their lives.
Yeah.
I'm not the caregiver.
Right,
so it doesn't mean I have to be there all the time.
No. But you're an adult who has influence. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. You're an adult who has influence in the lives of your nieces and nephews. If you're an adult who has influence in the lives of any kid, you have a voice that's really important to a child. You hear some people talking about a teacher. Like I can think of Mr. Geeson, my high school English teacher. He had an impact on my life. And people will look back on a teacher who spoke encouragement at a time when that was needed developmentally, who wasn't a parent or a Sunday school teacher or a youth leader. It's important for kids to be raised not just by mom and dad, but by a village, a small group if you're at a church, Sunday school teachers, grandparents, extended family, neighbors. Having other voices in your kids' lives is super important.
Well, in that village, I mean, I think of like there are still a lot of the people that I grew up with as a kid who like taught my Sunday school classes and that my parents were friends with, and like I'm still connected with them today, and like we still stay in touch, and they donate when I'm running for things, and it's just incredible that they're still a part of that village that is giving care to me even now as an adult. And it's just like, wow, that's that's a luxury really for a lot of people.
Kirk had a youth leader when he was in high school. Campus Life was the organization that he was a part of, and so he was 15 when he started in Campus Life, and he went on to be a groomsman in the wedding of his Campus Life leader. And just 2 or 3 weekends ago, he drove down to Illinois. There were 80 kids. Well, they're now in their late 50s.
Sure.
But 80 of these students, these teenagers who grew up under the influence of this man, went to his home. He had a reunion, and 80 of them showed up from all over the country, and they're in their late 50s. So valuable was he in the lives of these. Kirk is 59, so when he was 15, what's that, 44 years or 45 years ago?
That's incredible.
His influence remains strong. So you never know. You don't know. Sometimes we're told of the influence we have, but often we're not.
Well, and sometimes people like myself who aren't married and don't have kids may not think that we have that much influence, but we absolutely can.
You absolutely do. You absolutely do. Yeah.
So are there any other needs for this season that you would
did I put down any other needs?
I mean, food, shelter, clothing.
Love and acceptance, attentive care, affirmation and support for kids, freedom to explore with clear boundaries for teens. I think those are specific needs that I had noted.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so on a more practical level, how do you know if you yourself personally or someone you know is not going through one of these seasons in a healthy way?
Yeah. Well, part of that getting stuck or the pitfalls, a child who's just overly clingy to mom. It's normal for a child to be clingy to a caregiver. Sure. There's that stranger anxiety that peaks at like 18 months or something. But if you still are having stranger anxiety and don't want to leave your mother's side and you're 10, that's a bit of a red flag. That's something that needs attention. So that.
And what kind of attention would you say? Is that something that a parent just needs to be cognizant of, or do you need to involve a therapist?
Yeah, it depends. There's levels as with anything, but it would start with a parental conversation and parents, encouraging their child and introducing their child to other situations with safe adults that they can thrive in. And it might need to involve a teacher. This is what I'm noticing. What are you noticing at school? Or a Sunday school teacher, or a daycare, whatever groups your kids are in. And if it's affecting your child's daily living, if you're not able to leave your child, that's a problem. And then you might need to get a professional involved.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what about if it's someone else's child? Because that's a really difficult boundary to navigate, to tell a parent of somebody else, to say, I think your kid's struggling in a way, because it may feel like or sound like they're placing blame on the parent, which may or may not be accurate. But how do you navigate that space when you notice someone else's child that's really struggling or not walking through this in a healthy way?
Pray.
Yes.
Pray before you speak to a parent.
Which is kind of good just for any situation.
It is, before you just speak. If you're wondering about anything or concerned or just have a little bit of I wonder, pray first. But then there are different ways to start a conversation, like, I'm wondering, or can I ask you something? Or can I share with you something I've observed? Those are good ways to start a conversation that take the parent off the defensive.
Yeah.
And also invites them to say, yeah, it's okay if you share something. And I suppose it's a yes or no question. They can say, nope, I don't want you to share something you've observed, which is a whole nother deal. But
yes.
But generally, if
they answer that way, then you might understand a little bit more about why their child is maybe not progressing in a healthy way.
Yeah. So those are good keywords to start a conversation. Yeah.
And then I guess kind of the last piece of this to kind of talk about for now is, how does this season of life, or do these two seasons of life intersect with spiritual development? We've kind of touched a little bit on this, but
well, for kids, obedience without question of a safe, healthy, loving adult is a really important thing. And so the goal of parenting, I think, the young kids through age 18 is to lead your kids to transfer their obedience and trust and faith from you to God. So that should be a progression that I know my mom and dad love me. I trust what they say. I believe what they say. I trust that what they're saying and prescribing and how they've been forming me is for my best. And I will choose to live under their authority. And kids don't articulate it that way, but but then it's easier, because by the time they're late teens and then into the young adult transition that we'll talk about next time, they should not be dependent on your approval and your permission and all that. They shouldn't be dependent on that. They should transfer that to God, and they should go first to God and seek to please God and to obey God and to live under God's prescription. And that's a lot easier to do if they know that God is a loving parent and that God can also be trusted and loves them and has their best interest in mind. So in an ideal world, that's how it works. Yeah.
Well, and part of what I think is really interesting about what you just said is that the goal of a parent should be to transfer that child's trust and obedience from them to God. And I think a lot of times people think of parenting, the goal of parenting is to create like moral, upstanding, productive citizens, like people who go out and get jobs and are no longer dependent on parents. And I think that's really interesting to kind of reframe the priority of parenting is, yes, it's good to create an independent adult that can take care of themselves and whatever, but it's more important to lead them into a relationship with God. Like that's not something I hear a lot.
Yeah, that's number one for a Christian parent. Is to that's
and oftentimes in the process of doing that, you will in the process of transferring that trust from parent to God, that will also entail a lot of things that do help the child become, productive or get an education or get a job or whatever. So many of those things, of course, intersect and overlap. But it's just that reminder that no, the priority of parenting is discipleship.
Yeah, exactly. And you're doing all the other stuff. You're teaching them how to be responsible and be on time and get a job and manage their money, and you're teaching all that stuff too.
And of course too, this is not a one size fits all, because there are children that have developmental needs that may take longer to progress into these seasons, or they may not progress into further seasons depending on their circumstances. So again, this is not a one size fits all approach.
Right. Yeah, and it can be easy for a parent of older kids or young adults to look back and kind of beat yourself up over, I wish I would have done that. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, did I mess my kid up? And I remember asking Kirk that when our kids were little. I don't know, lose my cool with them, and I'd be like, oh, I don't want to mess my kids up. And he's like, okay, relax, relax.
Yeah.
But it's common it
Yeah.
can be easy for a parent to have a really unrealistic expectation of themselves.
Yeah.
Parents are not, no parent is perfect.
Yeah.
And every child will choose to, when they have, if they have children of their own, they'll choose to do some things the way their parents did, and they'll choose to do some things the way their parents didn't.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's always how it works.
When I think of people too in my life, and I'm sure we all have that as well, of circumstances where someone was an amazing, great parent and their kid strayed really far and made some really, poor life choices.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because like one person that I'm thinking of also had another sibling that made really good choices. And like they were parented by the same people.
Yeah.
And of course you parent each child a little bit differently, but two people can, kids can go on very divergent life paths despite the parents' best efforts.
Right. Yeah, we all have our own unique path and our own unique timeline, and parents do the best they can.
Yep.
And then kids at the end have to make their faith their own. And there's a transition. We'll talk about that at a later date, but there's a transition that happens. It's not like you leave home and bam, you've got it all figured out. Or you turn 18 and you own your faith and you're walking it out.
Yeah.
It doesn't, for some it happens that way. For others it takes a while, and it's a more challenging season for a million different reasons.
Yeah.
I can't think of the reference of the verse, but I have no greater joy than to know that my children are walking in the truth. That's a beautiful, beautiful verse. Look it up.
Yes.
I can't remember where the reference is right now, but that is true. That's the greatest joy for a Christian parent, is just to know that your kids are walking with the Lord, because then they have support, and they have truth, and they have encouragement, and they have God's peace in and through all of it.
Yeah.
Because God's always with them. We're not when they get older. Yeah. Yeah.
Any last pieces that you would say about these two seasons of life that you feel are important for us to discuss or be aware of?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered a fair amount.
Sounds good. Yeah. Well, that's our conversation about kind of the early years of a person's life, and we'll be back next week with some additional conversation about the next two seasons of life, which will probably resonate with me a lot because that's probably going to hit where I am right now. So we are excited to get into that, and I hope you listen next week, and I hope you have a wonderful day.